in conversations with the department hear that they are making steps towards including that as a prominent language as we move forward. And so I hear board members' points, and I agree that we will continue to be in conversation with the DO to make sure that that message is that we are moving forward on this. Yes, Amy, board member Amy.
This is I think we probably addressed this question before, but I can't remember. Can charter school students take any of the like the AP or IB tests through OSIS? Are they allowed to also receive the seal of biliteracy?
We did not include the charter schools in the seal of biliteracy, although charter schools can opt in if they would like to, but we did not put it as part of the policy. Yes, Mr. Horner.
In closing, I think well done. I mean, aside from this issue we're all debating, to me it's always important to go back and look at this kind of the emotion of the policy rather than just a policy. And I think the goal was to embrace this segment of our population, which is a very large segment, to appreciate them, that they're part of the system, so to speak, and they have a lot of value to add to the system. And I don't think historically that's been the case throughout the United States, and perhaps even in Hawaii. So that's why I think some of her sensitive, appreciate the logistical challenges. So part of it is messaging, the fact that we are going to tell that community that we're committed. It's not easy because of all the nuances, but I think that's really the goal, is to not to disenfranchise the community and to seek of all this academic demands that are being structured. We don't lose sight of the overall mission, which is really to embrace that population within our classrooms to ensure they're an integral part of the overall system and are appreciated. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you, board members. I appreciate everybody's input, and I want to particularly thank Sandy for all of her hard work with the seal, with the limited staff that OSIS has and the responsibilities that you're taking on. And I want to also reiterate that the Hawaii Language Roadmap Initiative did send in testimony and support and has appreciated the significant steps that the department has done with the seal and accepting of all languages spoken in our DOE. So I commend you thus far and look forward to moving forward and ahead on this initiative.
Thank you.
Salamat.
Thank you, Sandy.
Okay, thank you. Our next agenda is an update on competency-based education and the department's progress since December 6, 2015, when this item was last on the agenda. And I would like to call on Dr. Deanne Nagata, and Director Monica Mann. Deanne Nagato is the educational specialist in the School Literacy Improvement and Innovation section to present on this agenda item. And then Ms. Monica Mann, the Director of OSIS.
Good morning, board members. Just an update. I'm Monica Mann, one of the directors at OSIS. I'm here representing Assistant Superintendent Suzanne Mulcahy, who apologizes for not being here. We did a little switch up because our presenter will be Dan Miyamoto, one of our administrators. Dr. Nagato will be passing out our update. Oh, sorry, Allison will be. Thank you. But this is really a team approach, so please excuse the flexibility and us stepping in for each other. We want to thank you for this opportunity. We're here to give you an update on our competency-based education journey. Thank you to Board Member Williams for giving us a strong foundation to start off with. We wanted to show you what we've done and what we plan to do, and also invite feedback and input. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
Hello, good morning, everyone. This is an update to the competency-based education presentation that was done by Mr. Williams back in December. I'd like to start off by just summarizing some of the highlights of his presentation on competency-based education, also known as CBE. So when we last left in December, presentation highlighted selected DOE strategic plan objectives, DOE policies, and elements of next generation learning. In the presentation, a premise was made that current educational practices do not align with the objectives, policies, and next generation learning. Presentation also wanted to cover elements of CBE as an alternative to this, and the essential criteria of CBE being learning is best measured by mastery rather than time spent in the classroom. And the presentation also listed states that Hawaii could learn from in CBE and what those states are advancing, how states are advancing CBE. Sorry. Okay. So the presentation concluded with this last slide, missing leg of the stool, and really we're focusing on the last bullet there, competency-based education. Board members did discuss this a bit. There were some concerns, but general support for CBE with considerations for collaboration with the school level and a slow implementation process. So let me transition now into the update. So what is the Office of Curriculum Instruction and Student Support doing regarding competency-based education? First of all, we started off by doing a lot of research on CBE. And I'd just like to say that from my personal experience in researching this, that this is a very complex concept to grasp. We did talk to other states, and we did read all the materials provided by Mr. Williams. We did evaluate where we are with our current standards-based education system. And basically the outcome that we've realized is, one, that this CBE is very large, and it will involve the entire Department of Education and not only OSIS, because the impact is quite significant. This is a list of some of the research that we did along the way. But really, even for my own understanding, trying to comprehend where we are with our standards-based system, if we want to move to a CBE system, what would that look like and what would that take? I created this graphic for myself to just understand this whole concept. And I wanted to share it with you and walk you through it, just so that we all have this common understanding of what we're talking about when we're talking about our current standards-based system. If we want to move to a CBE system, what it would involve. So on your left-hand side of the graph is our standard-based system, current system. On the right-hand side is the competency-based system. I broke each system down into 3 common components so we could compare systems at least by a component level. It starts off with an instruction component, a grading component, and a promotion component. So what the instruction piece is how we do the teaching and learning. Grading is how we grade assignments, assessments, and report cards. And the promotion level is how we progress students through the system. I also color-coded it to illustrate what pieces of our current system and the CBE system are similar or the same. And the non-like colors is what would have to change in our current system in order to move into this CBE system. So how does OSIS fit into this transition, or even where we are and where we want to go? So if you look at the top level, at our instruction level, both systems utilize a standards-based instruction framework. And that's what OSIS currently does. That's the student instruction, student support piece. So if we transition into a CBE system, much of the work that we've done aligns really well in that transition. If we look at the grading component, you'll notice that CBE system utilizes only a standards-based grading system. Currently, our elementary uses that standards-based grading system. Our secondary side does not use a standards-based grading system. It uses a traditional grading. Practices may vary from teachers. They may use standards-based philosophy, but basically our report card is your traditional A, B, C, D, F report card. And at the promotional level is probably where the biggest contrast is. In our elementary and secondary schools, our whole DOE system is based on this Carnegie unit system. And basically, as most of you know, it's basically instructional hours for credits, and our students move as a cohort by grade levels through the system. If we look at the CBE system, that system does not have grade levels. So we would have to create a new non-Carnegie promotion system or proficiency system to replace the Carnegie unit system. So if we were to even look at what kind of impact this would have just on that promotion level, just some of the areas, it would range from everything from human resources, process changes, policy, union, legislative changes, accountability changes. For every department in the Department of Education would have to participate in this exercise to even comprehend what would be involved to move from a Carnegie unit system to a proficiency-based unit. And also I would recommend even looking at the data points and moving to this comprehensive competency-based system. What changes are we specifically looking at? And then once we can identify that, look at other states that have already implemented CBD for a while to see if those data points really made a difference to implementing CBE. And most importantly, we need to get a real clear picture of where we want this CBE to look like, and have to communicate that with the community, especially parents and students, and hear their voice, because what it looks like in a pure CBE system is radically different from what we have today. So from an OSIS point of view, our current practices around standards-based instruction and student support matches really well with CBE. It's not a perfect match, so we have to do some transition, but basically it's the same philosophy. But these other two components in the grade level, grading and promotion component, is really where conversation involves multiple offices, all of the school system, if we want to move forward with that. But Monica will cover some next steps, I believe.
Thanks, Deb. So where do we go from here? Just some possible next steps that we're exploring. We're going to be talking to our principals and complex area superintendents about this and see if there are any pilot sites, schools that might be interested in trying some of the practices out. We're working right now with the Buck Institute. There's two things that they're offering. One is a cohort of 30 administrators to work on changing and transforming their schools, and also a project with Honolulu District, and the training is actually going on this week, so that's kind of exciting. And then we do have to have further conversations with leadership in terms of where we're headed, what we're going to do, and how big a change and transformation we're going to take on.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. And any questions from board members? Questions or comments? No other members? I know Mr. Williams has some comments. Okay, Mr. Williams, you have the floor.
Everybody's waiting for me. Mentioned that you have conversations from other states. What states?
So we now have a very good friend in New Hampshire who's been doing a lot on competency-based education. We've talked with Iowa, Tennessee, and Kentucky. They are part of an innovative lab network collaborative that have been looking at competency-based programs. We've also been invited to participate in a consortia of states that will be looking at this next year. So that's through CCSSO. And right now there's about 12 or 13 states in that consortia.
How about Maine, Oregon?
We just looked on their websites right now, but haven't any personal contacts.
Colorado, Arizona?
We have for Colorado. We have for
Did what level of contact did you have? I mean, in the state offices, is that the kind of people, your counterparts in these states?
For New Hampshire, our main contact has been at the state office, and we've had a reference to one of the local districts that we've also been in contact.
Well, that's what I was going to suggest, because being both an SCA and an LEA, mainland states, their state offices are going to approach it very differently. They're going to have broad guidelines, or they may be more incentive kinds of things for what districts can do. So where the action is going to be, we're really going to be addressing the concerns that schools have are going to be at the district level. And it'll be especially important. A number of the districts, another one that's the furthest along from what I understand is Chugach, Alaska. The advantage is that they've done a lot of work. The disadvantage is they're very small. But then, being very small, they could be a pilot. I mean, they could be similar in size to a pilot that would be done in Hawaii, is what I'm getting at. So I think even though they're small, they could still be a valuable example and resources. And again, from everything I've read, they're the farthest along. So you haven't talked to them?
Actually, thank you for reminding me. Our standards specialist, Fern Yoshida, has reached out to them, and she's made contact, and they're setting up some future phone calls.
Okay. Can you tell me more about the Buck Institute?
Sure. Buck Institute is an organization that has approached our Castle Foundation and is working with our PDERI, our Office of Professional Development Educational Research Institute, on conducting professional development institutes for administrators in terms of the change process. They call it personalized learning. When we talked to them about what we're looking at for competency-based education, they saw a lot of similarities, but they felt that it required strong leadership, and it required principals who need to know how to go through the change process. So they're accepting a cohort of 30 administrators, I believe, over a 2-year period, and they'll be working with them, and we've been invited to attend as well. They also are working with Honolulu District on a separate project, but related, and their training, like I said, is going on this week, and we're participating in that.
By the way, I'm out of sequence what I wanted to do, but it just occurred to me, you're familiar with the strategic plan, both of you? So when we have this conversation, you're saying, if we do this and if we do that, the strategic plan says we will implement a proficiency-based advancement of students. So it's not if. As far as the board and the department, the management, the department, it's a joint department board strategic plan. So it's not if, it's when and how. Okay? There's a statement in here that I think, maybe I'm taking it wrong, but your slide that says CBE cannot be discussed only in OSIS. It requires a discussion with the entire Hawaii DOE as well as with our community. So instead of making an assumption, so who do you think should lead that discussion?
I think we would lead the discussion. I think we have to involve others.
Who would?
I think we would lead the
OSIS.
discussion, yes.
Right. So, I mean, I would put a star around that slide and market opportunity. I mean, this is, it's presented like, man, this is really big and it's beyond us. I mean, that's the way I took it. Maybe I took it wrong, but it should be, this is a great opportunity for OSIS to provide a service to our whole system. And if this discussion needs to occur, if it isn't OSIS that leads it, who is it going to be? I mean, historically, I'm not one of them. There's been people that said, we don't even know why we need OSIS. I never agreed with that. But, you know, this kind of opportunity is what makes OSIS really relevant. We have the caste system in complexes, and OSIS has people there, so you reach all the way into the complexes. You have opportunities at leadership conferences to begin these discussions. So I hope that you will proceed with this as an opportunity to take leadership in having these discussions and looking at implications. And one of the concerns I have with your presentation is, you know, if you're really thinking through, like it just has identified pilot sites, but one of the part of the deal with this is in terms of implementation. And by the way, I don't agree that it's a complex subject, a complex concept. The concept is very simple, changing from a time-based, aid-based system to a performance-based system, mastery. That's a simple concept. It's the implementation and the transition, the transformation is complex. I understand and I agree. But when you talk about a pilot project, really, you know, what I'm not hearing in the presentation is, have you thought through a lot of educators when they hear these ideas, they think right first of all about secondary schools, because you know you have credit by examination and those kinds of things that are readily applicable at secondary schools. But as your chart indicates, you know, really there's more similarity to what's being done in elementary schools. But if you start in secondary schools, let's say you just pick a pilot, who's interested, a secondary school is interested, but they're already receiving students based on the time-based system. So then it becomes hard for them because the variation in competencies is really great by the time you get to freshman in high school. But if you were starting in elementary, you're starting with kindergarten, and you say, you know, we have students who come into kindergarten in some schools, in some classes, that don't need kindergarten. They're ready for first grade. And you have other students who are, quote, not ready for school. I mean, they're not. They need 2 years in kindergarten. So, if you think of it that way, the most valuable pilot might be in elementary schools. So, but I'm not hearing that in your presentation. So, I just hope that you would be more assertive and more you know, give more depth to your consideration. Maybe you have, and it doesn't show in a presentation, but you know, not going to let this go. And again, it's a big opportunity for OSIS, and I was hoping for more. By the way, I'm not sure why the departure point was December 2015. The first presentation that I made to the board with this was in November of 2014. So maybe Suzanne, Assistant Superintendent Mulcahy, you know, is more recently appointed, and she assigned you folks in December. But the DOE as an organization has been on notice far earlier than that. And so I'm kind of not asking questions, but I hope that you take what I'm suggesting under consideration.
We appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. De Lima.
You know, nothing that I'm going to say is in disagreement with Mr. Williams, but it might sound as if it is, but I 100% agree with everything he stated, because quite frankly, when we were discussing the strategic plan in terms of proficiency-based promotion is what we were advocating. And quite frankly, what existing board policy back then was that it did not embrace social promotion. It embraced a proficiency-based system. But quite frankly, the department pushed back on the amendment of the strategic plan because there was a concern. And I think the philosophy that we were trying to promote is that, look, if you do not provide the intensive interventions at a young age, those students will have a lack of self-esteem because they will not be able to grasp the material because they do not have the foundation as they advance from year to year. And quite frankly, what you do is you create a whole culture of bullies. And then, they're unable to perform, and they have lack of self-esteem, and, a whole cadre of problems become a societal problem. Now, an additional point that I want to make today is that, quite frankly, if we had a proficiency-based system at a young age, you will get more parents involved in their children's education. Back then when we were saying, you start keeping back students who are not doing their work or not coming to school and not performing to a proficiency level, those parents or caretakers or guardians, whoever it is that's assisting those kids, will take more interest in their children's education because they want their kids to get it and advance. So, I think there's a lot of positives that would occur. The only thing that I want to comment on in terms of a suggestion is when you talk to where this is occurring, I think what we need to pay particular attention to is what are the interventions that they are employing? What resources are they utilizing to bring those students who are underperforming up to grade level? Because we have our RTIs, our programs in OSIS, and quite frankly, every time I hear a presentation, I'm trying to understand what students are actually getting helped and what are the actual results. That we, because we talk about we have all these intensive interventions, but we haven't really seen the data as to how those interventions have helped the number of students it's actually helped in particular schools. And perhaps that kind of information would also be available at those states or districts that have comprehensive-based promotions to understand how they brought their students up to grade level, how long does it normally take. And I tend to think that we really need to focus on the elementary school grades so that when they transition to middle school, that they have the skills and abilities to be self-starters, self-learners, and have the kind of self-esteem that they need in order to succeed in life. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for our presenters? Yes, Ms. Maggie Cox and then Mr. Horner.
I don't want to be the bad guy. If we're talking about competency-based and we're talking about that some kids need a longer period of time to grasp a certain concept, and then we talk about grade level at the same time, and then we talk about going into middle school, I mean, you're talking two different things. It doesn't work that way. So when we're looking at some kind of a pilot, you need to be thinking, I mean, it can't be, okay, well, we'll hold them in kindergarten 2 years, and then if they have to stay in third grade for 2 years and whatever, because by the time they get to high school, they'll drop out. They're too old, because you're talking about one system moving into another system. So the conversations really have to focus on how you can do, and that's why he said it's so complex, because that's the problem of trying to shove one thing into something that doesn't fit. Having had kids in high school that are older that drop out because they've been, quote, old style retained, because they don't want to be in school when, when they hit 18, they're going, I'm out of here. I'm not going to be an 18-year-old ninth grader. So in this whole working, it has to have a flow. Because you can't hold a kid, give them more time and call it a grade level and move into another one. It's just, I'm just sitting here going nuts over when we're talking about two separate things trying to put it together. So if OSIS can come up with a way to put it together, then I'm all for you. I mean, it's like, That's going to be the difficult part of putting it all together. So thanks, I just had to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horner.
Don't want to belabor this, but I'm still struggling with what Maggie said and Jim. Do we today, quote unquote, socially promote? Meaning, do we promote kids from second to third grade that aren't ready for the third grade? I think that's the implication. Is that our? Sure.
Sure.
Having been a middle school principal, and every kid that came into my school, I tested them in reading and math. And I can tell you, when they came into school, there were kids that were reading on first grade level, or even worse. So I'm just telling you that there's, in our system we have now, there's only so long you can hold a kid in elementary school if you expect them to do anything. So immediately I gave them reading help and math help. So yes, I think we do socially promote kids after a while.
When we look at the strategic plan that Mr. Williams spoke about, I was supportive of that concept. What I heard our professionals say that we're blowing up the first grade, second grade, third grade, and having no grades anymore, and doing a pretty substantial rewrite. But it seems to me there's a middle ground there where we begin to address the real purpose, which is that if a child is not ready for the next grade, that there's intervention in order to make that child ready. We use these fancy terms, but in reality, whether it's competency-based, Carnegie, whatever, it's the same thing. The child needs to be ready for the next level. We're not getting rid of the first grade and the second grade and the third grade, et cetera, which would be, I understand, somewhat catastrophic to the system. But maybe that's, and it's probably happening in certain charter schools and whatever proficiently, but isn't the goal here is about this theory of social promoting? I'll defer to Jim.
Mr. Williams and then Mr. Min.
Yeah, well, Mr. Lima hit the nail on the head. Right now, even look at the superintendent's evaluations, one of the items is closing the gap, right? So right now with the age-based system, really learning is the variable and time is the constant. And what this is about switching it around so that learning is the constant, time is the variable. So the point of it, not the point, there's multiple benefits, but one major aspect of it is to put the incentive on the educators, especially administrators, so that they're not going to let that child fall that behind. They're going to use every resource they have to make sure that the students progress satisfactorily, so that the ones that need the help get the help and get it, as Mr. Delima said, early. Right now, the incentive isn't there to do that, although many schools do. I'm not saying they don't. But they don't really have a great incentive to, because when a child's a certain age, they're going to move on. Now, that's contrary to policy 40. We're going to be addressing revisions, but that's contrary to policy 4500, which the last revision to that was 1996. So, but it still occurs, because you ask any middle school principal, any for that matter, any third grade teacher, what they're getting coming in, and they're going to tell you they're getting a wide range. They're going to get some that already know what they're going to be teaching them, and they're going to get some that need a lot of help, and that's like, it goes like a funnel. It gets wider and wider as time goes on, so that by the time they get to be freshmen in high school, it's a wide range.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Min. Will be the last word on this.
Thank you. Yeah, as a middle school teacher, 60% of our school was not reading up to age level. We now know 58% of our fourth graders aren't. So yes, students are passed on. And it does lead up to where Mr. Williams said, middle schools, we get all the elementary school kids. We know which ones haven't been getting their responsibility. You talk to elementary school teachers, there's site-based words that each grade level is supposed to know about. How many of them are actually meeting these type of things? So yeah, there is a problem on this type of thing. But I think the most important thing is you folks have a tremendously difficult job. But remember one thing, this is part of the strategic plan. So it's one of the most important areas. So, you know, I think the board is here to help you and we work together to find the best solution. But we cannot keep passing on these kids because they end up in society and then we end up paying for them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think you've heard the board's comments and points, and so thank you for presenting. Okay, so our next agenda item is an update on the status of, process, and timeline for this committee's review of board policies presently assigned to this committee. You should all have a copy of a memorandum in your meeting material which has a list of policies that this committee will consider in June. I also wanted to add that, as stated in the memorandum, the committee would like to ensure that the board begins the school year with a full and complete list of policies that follow the new numbering and naming conventions. So in order to do this, I would also like the committee to consider adopting the ENDS policies at the SAC meeting in June. So I'm adding the following to the list of policies that the committee will consider. So it's the E policies, the E2 mission, vision, values, E100 student success, E101 whole student development, E102 academic mastery and assessment, E103 health and wellness, E104 graduates ready for life, lifelong learners, E105 broad-based curriculum, and E106 supports for effective learning. Not included in this list are the new policies that were recommended by the Policy Audit Permitted Interaction Group. These are including culturally relevant curricula, graduation honors, recognition, environmental literacy, and civics education. Also not included in this list is the charter schools ENDS policy and 2 charter school policies. The new policies and charter school policies will be considered at another time. Staff will amend the submittal posted online to reflect these additions. Do you have any questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Williams.
The list that you references, there are policies there that are on today's agenda. They may be deferred. I mean, they may not be deferred also. So obviously, if they're deferred, they'll be on the future agenda. But if they're not deferred, they'll be taken care of today.
Thank you for that point. So if you'll notice on the list, there are asterisks of certain policies that potentially can be deferred today, as well as those that might be deferred in addition to those asterisks that we'll move to the June SAC agenda. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the action items on the agenda. First, we have an action item on a proposed new student health services policy combining board policies 103.2 student health services and 103.4 school-based health service centers. I would like to please call on board member Amy Appleby to provide the presentation on this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair. So you will see on the SAC agenda a memorandum that was created for your review prior to consideration, and I hope you got a chance to take a look at it. In the meantime, I will start our little presentation here on these 2 policies. So first is just a repeat of kind of reminder of when this policy was earlier presented for discussion in November at a November 3rd SAC meeting. So there's 2 policies that now exist: student health services and school-based health center services, 103.2 and 103.4. And I was assigned these 2 policies in April of 2015, and we started convening a group of about 25 stakeholders, folks from government agencies, nonprofit advocacy organizations, healthcare associations, principals, and complex area superintendents to start looking at these policies and come up with revisions to bring back to SAC. And so what we did come up with was this new school health policy. And I also shared that there's a ton of great things already going on in our schools, from the Healthy Keiki initiatives, and I'm going to share a little bit more about that, Vision to Learn, health screenings from the Lions Club and other nonprofits in our community. There's a Tripler Queens partnership for mental health in Central Oahu schools, and we now have 3 school-based health centers. And I just want to remind you that the overall intention of this policy is to create aspirational goals, provide an umbrella to support other policies, encourage the progress that's already occurring between the DOE, DOH, and DHS, and continue to require the department to form partnerships to provide additional health services in schools. So why are we going along this route? And I think the most important point to note is that we know that healthy students are better learners who are more likely to thrive in school and in life. And I think to underscore that point is the statement below, which came from a joint letter in January from the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, that stated, among other things, in communities across the country, educators, healthcare providers, and families are working each day to help children grow into healthy and well-educated adults. They cannot do this alone. This work depends on strong and sustainable partnerships and commitments between local, state, and federal health and education agencies. And I hope you will note in your testimony that was submitted that Joan, representing Virginia Pressler, the director of the Department of Health, strongly supported this policy as they participated regularly, both through Joan and their deputy director, Danny Tamiyasu. So thank you very much for your regular participation, support, ideas, and everything. You also received additional paper testimony this morning from the Department of Human Services MedQuest Administrator, Judy Moore Peterson, who comes from a state, Oregon, which has more fully implemented school health services across the state. And she says, as one of the agencies that has and will continue to work closely with the Department of Education on health-related topics, the adoption of this policy strengthens and enhances our work together. So next slide. Again, we just talked about this today. Some of the interventions that we can provide in our schools, I think health is one of them, whether we're looking at the achievement gap here among our high needs students, those who are English language learners, those who are special ed, and those who are disadvantaged. We want to start bringing this on average around 30% gap down. And we found through research and other data across the country that health is one of the mitigating factors to improve. So the next slide. This is a why, I think, not in my words, but in the words of one of our new CASs, who's doing a great job, and one of the nurses from the Healthy Keiki Initiative.
My name is Oishi. I'm a nurse practitioner working in the Kalukiapahoa school system. So I've been there for the past year and a half as we started this Hawaii Keiki Healthy and Ready to Live program.
My name is Chad Keown-Furious. I'm the complex area superintendent for Kalukia and the Wall Complex on the Big Island. Geographically, one of the largest complexes on the island.
What do I do as a Hawaii Keiki nurse? Right now I'm working within non-youth school, working with students, working with the health aides, working with staff, working with administrators, trying to give them another set of eyes looking into health in the school. Trying to attend to those needs so that the kids can be present, ready to learn, that they're mentally and physically ready for the day so they can do well in school.
Chronic absenteeism is probably the #1 reason why we need more health services in and around the schools. If a child stays home 10% of the year, around 15 days, they're labeled chronically absent. If a child misses that much school, the percentage of them not reading and writing and doing that, their grade level is much, much higher. So having a healthier child keeps them in school and keeps them in the seat
there's always been a lot of health issues with the students in Mountain View School. The area is known for just poor access to care. There's not a lot of providers nearby. It's nice to be able to see the students on a daily basis and have that continued time with them. So I feel like that's been a really great benefit, just be right there with them. And I hope that over time, with getting more education, being able to treat them more, and help them out with whatever it is they're dealing with, we'll be able to hopefully decrease some of those health issues that are impacting their learning.
It's made our school healthy, it's better. Right? So it's not just the nurse when it's always on the campus at Mountain View or on the campus at Cal-Mel. To improve the practice for all the health needs, right? And have better systems there. And they can also call her. So our schools are just safer and healthier.
Waikiki is ensuring the health and wellness of our children, of our future, our next generation of leaders. So I think it's really important that we put a lot of effort into this area so that we can ensure a better future for everybody. I feel like I have a special connection because I'm working within the complex area that I was raised in and I went to school in, so that's really rewarding. And I also know the impact that certain adults have on my education, and I'm excited to be able to give back to that.
Great. So thank you to all those folks at the UH School of Nursing who are involved in that program and providing the healthy and ready to learn name in real life day-to-day action. So next I wanted to share some of the feedback and point back to the timeline which I shared in the memo that you received. So there's been over a year now of opportunity for multiple feedback, and I really appreciate the folks in the department, Deputy Superintendent Schatz, who's allowed me to come and present to their leadership group back in September, when we had some words on the paper, but we kind of opened it up for, oh, do you think this other CAS has a better idea? Should we move in that direction? So we got some good feedback there. From there, I was invited to a secondary schools principal forum that they kind of organize amongst the principals, and from there invited to Central Oahu District Principals meeting in January. I've had, when people don't want to speak up, I've had emails and other meetings at Starbucks and whatnot with principals and health educators about this policy. And we've also had some good feedback based on concerns about how do our departments work together from the Attorney General, and how might the concerns raised from, I call it sort of Felix post-traumatic stress disorder impact how we move forward in the implementation of this policy. So what I wanted to share is literally the words that our DOE through these meetings and through direct feedback loop that the Deputy Superintendent put out. Not naming names, but this was one of the things. This gives schools a choice, yet keeps in mind the wellness of our students. Going forward. Next, provide to school a menu of services. It standardized the means to implement the partnerships through formalized MOA, consent forms, and information to parents and students, and supports them in getting started. So definitely that's an idea, and that's a part of what could occur in implementation. It's not in the language, but that's what one of our administrators is getting out of it. It's a step in the right direction. They would prefer to see a bolder statement with attached funding requiring vision, hearing, screening, dental, and other types of screenings at assisted checkpoints along a student's K-12 journey. And I think part of that is the journey that we'll take with the legislature in terms of how this policy is implemented over time. So I really appreciate that feedback. I don't believe the policy as written would be actionable by the department when many of the terms are not defined, and it is unclear as to which schools would have to implement. And I think this is kind of a line that I think of Maggie when I hear this concern, and I certainly understand where principals are coming from. One of the things that kind of perplexed me was every time you put the words Department of Education in a policy, an administrator sees that and says, oh, that's me. And so I think what we need to be clear about is that this is the, the department and not the people who are working at the school level who have to start building the standardized consent forms and the partnerships and others for our principals to utilize. This policy, I also liken it to our Native Hawaiian policies that we passed, where it's kind of visionary and forward-looking. We don't have all the steps in place for principals to go there, but it's something and somewhere we know we want to go. And so I deeply understand this concern and where's the language on implementation. But as policymakers, I think we need to, set the vision and where we're going. And we believe in the department and their partners in the Department of Health and Department of Human Services and our health providers in the community that they will help us take the next steps. Just one more set of feedback. Nurses should be present on every campus to support all students, but particularly for students who are medically fragile. Health centers should be comprehensive and partner with health academies on high school campuses and schools with high free and reduced lunch eligibility rates. And I think that's something that Board Member Min also pointed out today when he was asking Joan, how do we target these schools that might need extra health services and supports? And there's definitely best practices out there, whether it's from the CDC and their whole child, whole school, whole community model, where they have a school health index that school administrators and school communities could work together on, or whether it's the state of Washington who has used a weighted student health formula to help determine what services they might want to bring into their schools. So I think through this feedback, and I really appreciate Stephanie Shipton, because there's some people who can just, take a lot of talk, and boil it down to 3 points, and she did it when we talked about what are the issues now, since we've heard from administrators that we need to address going forward, and that's avoiding mandates, identifying resources, and improving communication and collaboration. We don't, in this policy, require all schools to provide all health services, but we definitely understand that we might want to more closely consider schools in high poverty areas for these services. For identifying resources, I really believe the DOE and partners should provide these resources to schools, including those health needs and assessment tools I mentioned, as well as the MOUs for partnerships, HIPAA and FERPA, which are the health or student privacy guidelines that govern our school universe and our health universe, et cetera, et cetera. I know how much fun that can be from personal experience out in Waianae, but it can be done. It can. And then we also, in terms of improving communication and collaboration, want to involve those other government agencies and community health partners to better understand what the DOE's needs are and how we already operate in today's schools, what are the services that are provided, and how they can make it better and not duplicate what we're already able to provide. This is a slide I presented last time. This is Amy Osselby and really no one else's approved vision of how we might move forward. But as I mentioned, there's those framework things that I think the big department up here, not at the school level, could help to provide in terms of how do we do this. And then there's this other idea of a database where willing community partners, whether it's Project Vision, American Heart Association, or others who are already working with schools, can commit and identify within our islands where they might be able to provide services or expand services that they're already providing in schools. This is basically the last thing I wanted to share with you is this slide, which is the actual policy language, and the next slide, which is the rationale, again, emphasizing that to have the most positive impact on health outcomes of young people, which is the next. Thanks. Government agencies, community organizations, schools, and other community members must work together on a comprehensive approach. And I think the final slide, if, say we change our vision and mission, but right now it's Hawaii students are educated, healthy, it's in there, joyful lifelong learners who contribute positively to our community and global society. I think while this policy, doesn't change anything tomorrow, it gives a strong foundation to the work that's already begun by the superintendent, the deputy superintendent, and other community partners who see the need at the schools, among the students, and want to continue to find ways to try to make a difference together. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, but I also, there is some language in the memo on recommendations.
Why don't you go ahead and make those recommendations or your motion?
Okay. So, would you like me to read them out loud?
Yes.
So there's basically 3 proposed motions: that the Student Achievement Committee recommend that the Board of Education approved and adopt the policy attached to this memorandum, Exhibit A. So take those 2 policies and create one. And that the Student Achievement Committee recommend that the Board of Education direct the Department of Education to incorporate the vision and implementation of Board Policy 103.4, that's the new one, into the extension of the joint Department of Education and Board strategic plan, which the department is currently working on. That's number 2. And finally, that the Student Achievement Committee recommend that the Board of Education direct the Department of Education to develop a plan for this proposed policy with short and long-term goals that show appropriate steps toward implementation. I think that's a nod, that one in particular, towards our somewhat stringent and difficult 45-day implementation guidelines, where this policy, we know it's going to take longer than 45 days. So I don't know if I see our superintendents there chatting. If you have anything you'd like to add, Deputy Superintendent Chop?
Yes, why don't we actually, well, we have this motion on the floor.
Okay.
So we have a second. And so now the board will be in discussion. So let's call on Deputy Stephen Schatz to give his input or comments on the proposed policy.
Good morning, Stephen Schatz, Deputy Superintendent. First, I want to thank Member Asselby for the work on this. I think this is a proposed policy that is aspirational and invitational, right? And I think that's really important to our field, that it's not a new mandate. I think the work that's going on in the field in the health arena is really exciting. We had the opportunity to visit some of those new health centers at Waianae Intermediate and Waianae High School a couple weeks ago with Camille. Very impressive and very exciting. And I think that this, I just want to say too, that the policy where it started and where it is today is not the same place, and that's due to the feedback we got from principals in the field. And I think that's a positive, because the extent to which their voices are heard throughout this process is going to affect the implementation down the road. And so I just want to say a mahalo to Amy for working with us, with Tammy, with Stephanie, and our principals to get it to the place where it is today.
Can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
I really appreciated that Sandy on the multilingual policy added the student voice into that. And on a day-to-day practical basis, it's also really important in terms of student health that we listen and understand the student voice. And we've seen some of that in that youth risk behavior survey, whether you have your opinion as much as how valid that is or not. What we've seen in the health field is, honestly, students interact, or adolescents in particular, interact more objectively when they get to put their responses about their health and behaviors into a device or on a sheet of paper, instead of directly, answering a question, have you ever had sex, or have you smoked cigarettes, or those kinds of things. So I think that continuing and ongoing student input should be a part of this discussion. And we've really appreciated and molded what we're seeing at Waianae Intermediate and Waianae High School based on how students are reacting to our services that we're providing. And thank you, Camille and Deputy Superintendent, for coming out. Very appreciated.
Thank you. Mr. Chen has a comment.